So this is about the story of Oswalds Mill audio, which is back to the story of this place, Oswalds Mill. You can hear probably some noises from below. That's Ted and Andrew rebuilding the stonework. You can see that in another video. I guess I have to go back to 26 years ago, 25 years ago, because it took about a year to get this place in any kind of shape to actually live in. Windows, the structural work done, basic electricity, sanitary stuff like that. But then this place was just empty. And Ralph Lauren loved that because they didn't have to move any furniture. They just did a whole home line here with this stuff that was like, I thought I'd be like really in love with all their setups, but that was the beginning of supersizing furniture, and that wasn't my cup of tea. But anyway, everything in this place, I put in, and every piece has a story. Actually, it's funny. So these Barcelona chair frames I found for nothing. There were no seats, so I made these leather slings because Barcelona chair kind of goes back to ancient Greco-Roman furniture designs, as you can find depicted on urns, right? And I think that was a direct inspiration. And this is actually how the Greeks and the Romans would do chair backs. And I was just having a lot of fun fucking around with stuff. There were no real stakes. So, then you could be a little more creative. And this place, it got pretty creative. One of the first things I wanted to do was to see if I could find the really big, old movie theater sound systems. And, when I moved here, it was a lot easier because there were theaters out here that closed in the 30s because of the Great Depression, and when they maybe never reopened, that was a few, or they reopened and they just shoved the stuff away and put new equipment in. And I managed to get my hands on things like that. And that's what's going on here, because this has been my main system, my most important system to refer to, like, so that you know what you're doing. That was the tube amplifier system that was used for Fantasia in 1939 or 1940. These actual amps, some of the most amazing things ever made sonically. All this stuff here is actually pretty rare. That's a Commonwealth idler drive turntable that was used by Australian Broadcasting. RCA 70D transcription deck. This is the prototype for our K3 turntable, and K5. This is K0, keel. It's called keel. That's why K, Krebs keel. And this whole bench rides on air, so that this doesn't get into the turntable system. So I've had this, not like this, but since the beginning. And when I first started, I actually had the speakers in those two corners. I'm not an engineer. I'm really super dumb when it comes to electronics. So I made friends with people who were really good at that, local people. But you got to remember that RCA, which was, one of the biggest, if not the biggest at some point, electronics company in the world. They invented the TV. So they're in Philadelphia and Camden. And there's just a lot of people in this region of the United States, of the world, that specialized in audio and the kind of sound that I was interested in. And those people, well, I managed to find them, and we all became friends, and this place became a kind of a congregation spot. until one friend said, well, look, Jonathan, you're really good with food and you're really good with wine. I was a little too good with wine. And, why don't we do an Oswalds Mill tube and speaker tasting, like you have a wine tasting or a cheese tasting or something like this, or a tasting menu. And I thought, well, that's kind of funny. Let's just do that. Now you got to remember, I was a filmmaker. I'd done this television show about food. My interest in audio was how great can we make a sound system in here using these vintage components. And that first tasting was a really big success. I think there was only 14 or 15 people. And then the year after, and the year after that, it became a thing. It became a huge thing. And people were coming from all over the world to do this. It's a private event, so it was limited. And the way it worked was simple. We had the really big speakers, and it's got to be some pictures of that someplace, with the big multi-cell horns. I'm not using those right now. Anyway, there were these two huge speakers, and that was the Mill system. Actually, I think I was using the RCA rack as well. And the participants were bringing tube amplifiers, almost all low-powered triode tube amplifiers, to play on these speakers against the other amplifiers. So you would have maybe 20, 30 different amps. Some people brought small speakers and then they set up in some of the bedrooms and the other floors. But generally speaking, it was about what those tube amps would sound like on this speaker system and who would make the best one, the most beautiful sounding, the most pop, whatever, different parameters that you could judge by. And by the end of those tastings, something happened. I met people like Bill Woods, who became our speaker designer, who, this is what they did for a living. And there's really only a handful of people on the planet, and in the last 20 or 30 years, who can say that they design horn-loaded loudspeakers for a living. Like, that's what they do every day. It's pretty much, copying things and very derivative. But Bill was not derivative. I mean, he was a genius, and he passed away 2 years ago. Really miss him. So on the back of this is an RCA driver from 1937 or 1938, which, still hasn't really been surpassed. This thing here. That's the RCA MI1428B. And yeah, there is an A version. Doesn't sound as good as the B. So Bill Woods, Steve Shell, who just passed, and Rich Drysdale, they founded Cogent. Bill founded his own horn company. And they both said to me, look, Jonathan, you're really good at sort of directing things. You were a film director. It's about putting people together and things together. Why don't you really go pro and create a company? We'll all help you. So I had like the world's best tube amp designers, the world's best horn loudspeaker designer, people who were making the only new field coil, the world's best field coil, you could say. I mean, tone arms, Frank Schroeder, it was all there. And then this place, and if you're cooking, you know what I'm talking about. You have these fantastic ingredients. So you go to the market, and you come back and you dump it all on the table, and say, okay, well, tell me what to cook with this. And what I cooked up was OMA and Fleetwood Sound. So that's the story.